progress as well. Okay, so let's keep on going here. All right, so we listened to him. Speaking of people going in front of their peers for issues, the next story is absolutely stunning. I think we have a lot to talk about on this part. So let's start with a Texas man who is speaking in front of his local school board and what he had to say. So let's listen to this first.
My name is Greg Barrett. I graduated from KISD in 1983. I started in 1975 with Mr. Lance. My legal name is Greg Gay. I was bullied, unbelievably bullied. I started out and I had teachers that bullied me. I had kids that bullied me. Even the coaches, I had nobody to turn to. One day at lunch, I had my head shoved in the urinal where it busted my lip. I had laid on the ground in a fetal position as the kids kicked me. I got up, I rinsed my face off, I walked out of the lunchroom, walked straight to the principal's office, and he told me, these kids will grow up someday. They won't always be like this. But yet, here I am, covered in urine from laying on the ground underneath the urinal. My lip was busted, and they sent me home. Well, I went home, and I got the .45 out of my father's drawer and put it in my mouth. Because at this point, I had nobody in the school system to help me. Is that the way this is going to be? Lance, you were the one that shoved my head in the urinal.
Mr.
Thank you.
Tell you what, this is unbelievable.
Now, we've talked about bullying in the past. Bullying is obviously an issue and always has been an issue. This is nothing new, although it's portrayed as something new. And it has evolved with the times as well. One movie that I've always pushed on the podcast and to other people in public as well is a movie called Disconnect with a guy from Horrible Bosses. I forget his name offhand. But it's an incredible movie that kind of brings up the times for people my age and older on people that are dealing with the bullying situations and how that's moved to the online world as well, and how we need to be keeping a closer eye as much as possible without a complete invasion of privacy with our kids. Although if you're a parent, it's easy to make the case that their privacy isn't really that much of a concern over their safety. Bullying has always been around. I think that people are a little bit too sensitive nowadays, but it's something that's always been a problem, and I'm not saying that it's not a problem. Here in this case, what we have is Greg was bullied as a teenager and goes in front of the school board in the Katy district in Texas. Now, this video is one of those webcam videos because most school board meetings are typically broadcast live on the internet for people that can't make it into the boardrooms. We did that here in our own school district as well, or continue to do it when I was on the board. And goes in front of this board, and the superintendent of the school board is Lance Hindt, and he is the one, it turns out, that bullied Greg when they were in school together and shoved his face into a urinal and did some pretty horrible things, and the school just didn't back him up, okay? And yes, you could say in regards to the being a little too sensitive nowadays that probably back then they could have been a little bit more sensitive because bullying wasn't taken so seriously. But this video went viral very quickly, as a matter of fact. Within a week, it just took off like crazy, which, before I get to that, I don't know if you noticed this, but on the video at the end there, as Greg walked away, you could hear the superintendent, Lance, say, "This is unbelievable," and then start laughing about it. I think that portion right there is the reason why this video went so viral. Had Lance taken the opportunity to say, address the situation and say, "My gosh, either I remember it or I personally don't remember this situation, and if that was me, my gosh, I'm so sorry. Obviously, things have changed in my life, and I think that's a great example of what people shouldn't do. And if it was me, make up a good apology on the spot. You're a superintendent, and we're going to get to the perks of being a superintendent in this specific school district. But it got to the point where Lance was so consumed by the amount of hate that was coming his way because of this video going viral that within a week he had to address again the school board and the public of the area, and people around the country, for that matter, with his own apology. So let's take a look at his apology for a second here as well.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Board. And if you don't mind, I'd like to comment. As indicated, I've spent 27 years dedicating my life, my passion, my commitment to my family, to my students, to staff, and to the communities that I have been privileged to serve. But folks, I recognize, I'm telling you, I recognize I am not a perfect person. I don't think anybody in here really is. And I do recognize that. While I understand the perception, please know my reaction this past Monday night was one of shock. It wasn't one of disrespect or insensitivity. I was purely shocked. You know, to the hometown that raised me and where I now proudly serve, I regret the negative attention that's been brought to this community in the past week. Ultimately, I'll be judged by one person.
Yes, yes.
And that is
Yes.
God, my Lord and Savior. That's who will judge me. Now, moving forward, I pray, and I ask everybody to pray, that our combined efforts will continue Katy ISD's commitment to providing, as I tell my staff all the time, providing a safe and secure learning environment for our 78,000 kids and our 11,000 plus employees, what I call our superstar staff. You know, serving this board in our community, I'm telling you, is the greatest personal and professional privilege of my life. Who gets to come home and do what I get to do? And for that, I am telling you, I am thankful. And I would like to personally thank this board for your unwavering support. And I'd like to thank the community that's here to support me as well. We've got a great school district, folks. We've got a great school district. And I look forward to continuing to push this district forward so we can continue to be recognized as not only the best in the state, but the best in the country. Again, thank you, and let's move on.
What an apology. It blew me away. I'm in shock here that he didn't apologize. First of all, I mean, here we are. We're waiting for this apology. Hey, Greg, things have changed. Invoking Christ, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too after we get to one more detail that surfaced in the meantime. But his apology was not to the person or people that he may have bullied at the time that he was a student. His apology, and the only apology, and you could go back and watch this, is to the public for bringing a negative spotlight to the school district. In the meantime, you can see in the last video that the room was virtually empty except for maybe 10 people, which is much more than you'll find in most public school board meetings. It's usually pretty empty unless there's something that's being talked about that riles people up, like in this case here. But I also have to tell you too that these school board meetings can be very staged as well. I have found myself watching and participating in school board meetings where the odds were stacked to look like the opinion of the public was in favor of a certain situation, just because they got the word out a little bit harder than everyone else. In this case, this superintendent found enough people to fill the room to applaud him whenever possible. You missed the applause at the beginning. I cut it out because there was a lot of wasted time of probably about a minute and a half of applause from the audience before he even starts to speak on the situation. He stacked everything against the person who was bullied in the room, goes on to not apologize to the person who says that he was bullied, and then at the end, after invoking Christ as his Lord and Savior, then at the end goes on to say, let's move on. Well, of course he wants to move on. Look at the type of attention that's been brought to him specifically and this school district. Yeah, I think his main objective right now is to move on. But in the meantime, some more details have surfaced in regards to Lance as well. I said, now this could possibly be chalked up to as one man's word versus his accuser, and we can't really tell which way to go. But then some more information came out against the superintendent. Apparently, the Katy ISD superintendent was once sued for a fight that allegedly left a man in a coma. According to ABC 13 in Texas, we are now learning about accusations made 35 years ago that Dr. Lance Hindt once got into a fight that left a man in a coma for 5 days. The lawsuit alleges then 18-year-old Lawrence Hindt left a party on the night of February 18, 1983. The lawsuit claims that there were large amounts of alcohol and drugs and that junior high students were present. The lawsuit says that he was taking his girlfriend home in his car when he encountered William Stein, who had just returned home from having dinner with his wife. Stein hollered for the teen to stop speeding in an area in an alley where kids could be playing. How disrespectful. Maybe Lance is the victim here, right? The automobile came to a sudden halt. It then backed up, and the driver got out of the automobile and rapidly approached me, venting anger while I was standing on the edge of my driveway and alleyway, Stein described in the lawsuit. Now, I want to talk about something like this for a second here. It talks about venting anger as he approached him rapidly. I encourage you to actually go back and watch this video of Lance's apology again, because he shows to me, and I'm no psychologist, but I could have a couple friends who could get involved in the conversation too. He shows classic signs of someone that has pent up, bottled rage, trying to control it as much as possible. When you go back and you watch this apology video, he is shifting in his seat. He seems to be clenching and holding back on just outright letting it fly. I think that's a sign that you can see something. I'm not a professional on the matter. I'm not a psychologist, as I said, but I think that those who are familiar with bullies, when they are present in front of the public and not showing the signs of their actual bullying in person, I think you can actually see that type of behavior with him in that video. So I would encourage you to go back and look at that. It says Hindt allegedly shoved Stein against the neighbor's fence, striking the man in the ribs with his fist. Stein blacked out only to awaken 5 days later from a coma on February 23rd, 1983. According to the lawsuit, Stein suffered blunt trauma to the head and face, resulting in a skull fracture, lacerations of the upper lip, contusion, and an injury to his right eyelid. Also, there was a separation of the right shoulder joint and fracture, plus fractures to the third and fourth ribs, the statement read in the lawsuit. I do not feel I have fully recovered at this date due to weakness in the right arm and dizziness caused by the trauma to the right side of my head. The Katy athlete, Lance, who went on to University of Oklahoma on a full football scholarship, so the guy was obviously big and empowered at the time, admitted that he never sought medical help for Stein at the time of the incident. So he admitted at this time to this incident. So this is in the records as something that actually did happen. The lawsuit also alleged that Hindt had been involved in more than a single fight in the 5 years leading up to Stein's beating, a fact that Hindt never denied. So this isn't the only instance as well. This is what we like to call a pattern of behavior, by the way. In the end, the now Katy ISD superintendent never faced a penalty, with the exception of splitting the court costs linked to the lawsuit with the boy who threw the party in 1983. So let's talk about a couple things here for a second. Lance, in his apology, went on to say that there's only one person that can judge him, and that's his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That was my Texas accent there for a second. Here's what I find interesting on that. I am not going to judge his level of Christianity because I myself have many faults myself as a Christian. But if you are truly a Christian that is upset about this situation, I believe you would repent in a form of apology to Greg and say, listen, obviously I had some times in my past I'm not proud of. I may have bullied some people. I had some of my own anger issues at the time, and that's all in the past. And I can tell you right now that some of those things are the exact reason that I had to face reality and come to Christ at a certain point in my life. And I'm sorry for what I did to you, but I feel like, you know, I have to apologize to you right now, but I will face that judgment later on in my life or in my death as well. And then you could launch into everything else that you said. Whether or not Greg accepts his apology is on Greg at that point then. Is the apology enough? I don't know. We didn't get to that point. We are not seeing that come to fruition because Lance did not allow that to happen. There was no closure for Greg. And he also didn't deny the bullying of Greg either, or that incident at all. All he did was apologize to the public for bringing a negative spotlight and that he wanted to move on from the situation. Well, just in case you don't know statistics or facts about this situation, Katy ISD happens to be the 8th largest school district in Texas, so it's up there. Lance has a salary that ranks as the highest in the state. His salary comes in at $375,000 per year. Now, I know times are tough in education and it's hard to get pay, but my word. Okay, now this type of thing is probably a discrepancy between the administration in schools and teachers and the union and stuff on where the pay goes and everything and who's more deserving of what. That's a discussion for a whole other time. But he is not only supposed to be judged by God in the end. He is supposed to be held responsible by the constituents in his district. This man is specifically overseeing school districts with the children of the constituents in that area. He should be judged. He should be a good representative. And, you know, I am all for forgiving people for their past. There's people that I know that were bullies that had done some mean things to me that I am friends with now because I accepted their change in attitude and lifestyle and everything. But the fact remains, this guy could have used this as a perfect teaching example as a leader in the community to dispel bullying situations and say, yeah, you know what? I have my own past. We're not all perfect. I may have bullied some people in the past and I got better. I learned my lesson. I'm here today as your superintendent to help people see that bullying is an issue and we need to bring this to the forefront. None of this has happened. I don't know what needs to happen from here for Lance to come to a realization or for the Katy ISD community to come to a realization, but had he apologized, had he admitted to these things, had he done all that and then talked about Christ and forgiveness and people showing him grace and everything, maybe then we could move past this and continue with him as being a superintendent. But his actions throughout this whole case and the history leading up to it have shown that he is ill-equipped to be a superintendent of a school where bullying is supposed to be a central issue, where they're trying to take care of it and alleviate those types of situations. If I were in that school district, I would be raising hell at every school meeting about this man as much as possible. The only way to get things done, unfortunately, is to show up. There's a couple other stories. that I posted recently, and we've talked about this before as well, that it's hard to sue a school district and make change because the people that are involved in the decision making, whether it be the board, who in most cases don't get paid for their positions anyway as elected officials, or the administration, or if the teachers do something wrong, when you sue a school district, I don't really even think that they learn their lesson in these cases, because you end up suing the taxpayers of the school district. If they have to pay out an enormous sum of money, they're going to go back and raise the millage of the taxes in the area to help pay for that lawsuit. So in the end, you just end up pissing off your neighbors because your property taxes and everything else go up for you. And what happens to the people that are responsible for the decision making? They don't give a rip, because they don't have to financially pull anything from their pockets or bank accounts to alleviate that situation or lawsuit, unless they happen to get fired. If they're in a position where it's an elected position or something like that, then maybe they have to fear being not elected again. But that's about it. This is a pretty sad reflection of some of the things that are going on in school districts nowadays, but it's also an even bigger sad reflection of bullying and people not showing personal responsibility. I think that's another thing too, is we have a very large personal responsibility problem in this country. According